Hey everybody! Cheers! Happy Good Friday! Crafting Journey here, that Journey Chick on Instagram. How is everybody? The week is over! Yay! I had today off. Didn't know that until yesterday. The boss emailed me. She emailed everybody. She's like, "Who's taking tomorrow off?" I'm like, "What?" Like you had the option to work if you didn't want to take the holiday. You could save your time for another time. I'm like, "No, no, no. I want the day off. I need a day off." Yeah. So, much deserved, much wanted. And so I took the day off and I am thrilled. I have all these plans. I'm going to diamond paint, I'm going to cross stitch, I'm going to loom. I have all these little projects going. And I'll probably do some of each. I just enjoy it that much. I started a loom hat yesterday because I'm working on my first loom tutorial. Um, so more to come on that. Once I complete the hat, I'll put the tutorial up, and I hope you guys give me some constructive criticism on it. But that'll probably be a week or so out. I was really surprised that you guys, at the response that I got to my silly chair video. I'm like, nobody's gonna watch this. It's silly. Oh my gosh. More people watch that than they watch the morning show. And I did forget to put the link to the chair in the description of that video. I will go back and do that, and I do apologize for forgetting that link. Still working on Alice Lost, but we're working our way towards the end. Yes, like the end is in sight. Well, sort of. It is. I feel like we're making progress. Yes, we are. We're making progress. Okay. So we got the day off. What are you guys' plans for the day off? What are your plans? I know that, like in the trial, the judge is actually planning to only do half a day and let the jurors go home at 12:30, because it is Good Friday. It's a Christian holiday, and in observance of the day that Jesus died on the cross. So it is a very religious holiday. And boy, if I said that wrong, isn't it Good Friday? The day he died on the cross? Yeah. I haven't been to church in a long time. Oh my God, this is terrible. um, and we're not going to get into my religious beliefs, but suffice it to say that I believe in a higher power. Let's. I'm just going to leave it there. So if I got that wrong, my apologies. But it is a religious holiday, so for many, many people. But that doesn't mean you can't do some crafting. Yeah. So what national day is it then? Well, in addition to being, Good Friday, it is also National Peanut Butter and Jelly Day. More importantly, Peanut Butter and Jelly Day. That's terrible. Okay, Good Friday's up here, peanut butter and jelly. But we gotta talk about peanut butter and jelly. Who does not love peanut butter and jelly? I'm gonna tell you who. My granddaughter, Malia. What she used to like it, she said it's the only kind of sandwich she will eat. So the National Peanut Butter and Jelly Day celebrates a classic food favorite. The average American will have eaten over 2,000 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches in, whoa, before, I was going to say in their lifetime, before they graduate from high school. Oh my God. So this is so funny because I'm taking Malia home the other day and she's complaining bitterly. Oh, mom and dad make me eat peanut butter and jelly every single day, and I'm so tired of it. And I'm like, well, tell them you're tired of it. I do. Like, I like, well, what do you want instead of peanut butter and jelly? I just want like salad or, soup. I said, well, do you have a way to heat it up? Oh, yeah, we have microwaves at school. I said, well, then you just need to tell your dad. No, but he won't let me. I'm like, he won't let you. So this poor child will definitely have eaten over 2,000 peanut butter jelly sandwiches. So I'm like, well, why don't you mix it up? Try different kinds of jelly. Oh no, just strawberry. I'm like, but there's raspberry. Oh, because she says, I don't like grape. Well, I said, but there's raspberry and apricot and apple butter. There's all these like apple butter and peanut butter. Oh, in fact, I wanted to like pull over and go get some apple butter. I I should have ordered that on my order today. Dang, because that's delicious. Anyway, she's like, oh, you think mom and dad are going to buy me apple butter or apricot jelly? I'm like, just ask them. I said, go home, make out a list of the stuff that you want for lunches, and just hand it to your parents and say, this is what I would like for my lunches, and here's my shopping list. And she's like, oh, right, I'm going to get yelled at. I'm like, no one ever died from getting yelled at. She's so afraid of her dad. I said, does your dad beat you? No, he just yells. Goodness gravy. This poor child. Now so I said, well, it sounds like you're going to be eating a lot more peanut butter and jelly in your future. Oh my God. Poor kid. So peanut butter was considered a delicacy in the early 1900s and was only served in New York City tea houses. Everything starts in New York City. Why is that? The good, the bad, the ugly. It all starts in New York City. But then this article was published in Good Housekeeping about with a recipe on how to make it yourself. So then it started becoming very, the price started to diminish and it became very popular with children. And yay. I remember growing up, well, not growing up, but, and I don't even actually remember it. My mother told me that when I was 2, we lived in France. My dad was in the military. We lived in Orleans, France. It's where my sister was born, in France. But the neighbor boy would come over every day for peanut butter because they didn't have peanut butter. Like, peanut butter was a rarity in France, but my mom could buy it, at the commissary, the military commissary. And so this little boy would come over every day because he wants some of the peanut butter. Because I think that's funny. Now, I don't know if it's still a rarity in France today, but or any other country. Isn't it funny how like each country has their thing? Ours is peanut butter. In Australia, they like their Vegemite. Have you tried Vegemite? Oh Lord, I have a video where I tried Vegemite. I'm sure it's on my channel somewhere. I'll put a link to it up here. You have to see my reaction to this Vegemite. It was a challenge that was issued by Pippa. Pippa's another creator, and she's from Australia. And so I tried this Vegemite, and I'm like, oh, this is god awful. Yeah. So then everybody's like, well, you use too much. Well, it don't matter. It still tastes horrible. Like it's an acquired taste. So I venture to say that there will never be, or there is not, a National Vegemite Day in this country. Maybe in Australia there is. That's what I should do. Start looking up national days in other countries. That's an idea, huh? Like, what national day is it or do they even have national days in Australia? I have to ask. Why is this giving me a hard time? Sometimes these squares just don't want to line up and they just want to pop on you. That one almost hit my eyeball. There we go. We made it work. Um, okay, so peanut butter and jelly. Let's talk about. Oh, before I go on the peanut butter and jelly, in the description, I will put a hidden picture puzzle where you can get to find all the little peanuts. It's kind of a juvenile thing, but give it to your child to play. And then there's also I'll put a link to this coloring page. It's a coloring page of the same image where you can find all the peanuts. But it'll be cute. Let your kids eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for lunch and do a puzzle or paint a picture. Get the crayons out from this past week. Yeah, or combine it in your coffee, peanut butter, not jelly, just peanut butter. Oh God. Oh, I have these. When I went to take Malia home the other day, they get, her mom gave me this little bag of those Jelly Bellies, and it was these really unique flavors. There was s'mores, and I forget what else, but one of the flavors was peanut butter and jelly. So I tried it, and it tasted exactly like peanut butter and jelly. I'm like, oh my God, how did they do that in a little Jelly Belly jelly bean? It tasted exactly like peanut butter and jelly. So I can't remember the last time I ate a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I do enjoy them though. I do, but I haven't eaten one in a long time. I think the main reason is I'll buy bread, but it sits in my freezer because if it's sitting out, it'll just go bad. So it's in my freezer and then I forget about it. But anyway. All right, let's talk about judge, jury, and journey. Well, big day yesterday at the trial. This whole week has been a whirlwind of emotional uh, testimony, and yesterday was no exception. So they put on George Floyd's girlfriend for the last 3 years. He's been dating this Courtney Ross. And she was, put together, and very emotional. She's talking, when they asked her to talk about how she met him, I guess they both worked at this Salvation Army, and he was a security guard there. And she was trying to tell this story, and she just couldn't stop crying. Poor thing, she just couldn't. I felt really bad for her. So, but they really painted the picture of a very, very kind man. Like, sorry about that. The dog wanted in. I had to let Tootsie in. I forgot she was out there. Poor thing. Now, why is the garbage man going by on Good Friday? Okay, so I was talking about the girlfriend's testimony. So she really painted the picture of this very, very kind man. But then she also was very open about both of them being addicted to opioids. She said, this is, how did it come about? Well, she said it's the typical story. We both had chronic pain and we became addicted to opioids. She said mine was in the neck, George's was in his back from playing football and sports, which, that's perfectly understandable. But I guess it sounded like it became more and more difficult for them to get their opioids. They preferred getting them by prescription because she felt those were safer. Sometimes what they would do is they would buy other people's prescriptions and then go get them filled. I can't even imagine how you do that or how much it would cost you. But man, I bet it's a pretty penny. But they didn't go into that. But then there were times when they would go and obtain their opioids off the streets. She said off the black market. And one of the ways that they would obtain their opioids was from two different sources. This and and forgive me, I forget his name, Morris Hall, I think his name, Morris Hall, and the other one, um, her name was Hill, I believe. But anyway, these are the two people that were in the car with George Floyd during this event. Morris Hall was in the passenger seat and at the time was wanted, had warrants out for his arrest. They never even checked. They never even checked. Like right now he's sitting in jail, this guy, on unrelated domestic violence charges. And he has refused to testify. His lawyer sent a letter to the court saying, my client will not be testifying. He will be pleading the fifth. I'll bet. Because according to Miss Ross, this is the guy that they would get their black market opioids from. You know, and what a coinky-dink that these are the two people Mr. Floyd is cohorting with that particular day. Two sources of where he gets his opioids. And the reason I think that's important is that Miss Ross goes on to testify that when they would get the drugs off the black market, she felt like bottom line, they were probably laced with something else, fentanyl, something else. She goes, you know, when you take an opioid, you feel relaxed and it makes you, it makes you feel better. It gives you like a little high. She goes, when we would take this black market opioid, she goes, sometimes I was up all night. It was such a stimulant. So, God knows what they put in these pills. So, but very insightful that this was the source of George's drugs. Now, and the other reason I thought it was important is because maybe that explains his bizarre behavior. People are saying, it's not behavior typical of someone on an opioid, but is it behavior typical of someone who's on an opioid that he got off the black market that might be laced with something else? Who knows? I don't know. We'll see what the experts say and the toxicologists, because I'm sure they tested for all that. So and she was very emotional, Courtney Ross. She was crying, and I probably went through an entire box of tissues while she was up there. Poor thing. She testified that George had COVID back in March. She was aware that he had a prior overdose in March and had to be hospitalized for 5 days. She was aware that he did do heroin, and that in May he was, she said sometimes they would be clean, sometimes they wouldn't. It was off and on with these two for 3 years. Sometimes they were clean, sometimes they weren't. But in May, when all this goes down, she said, his behavior started to become, started to change. She didn't describe how it changed, but so she suspected that he was back on the pills. I think she was saying that she was clean at this point. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And that she knows that he had bought pills from Mr. Hall the week before his death. She knew that George Floyd, she said, I wasn't with him when he bought the pills, but George told me I bought some pills from Mr. Hall just the week prior to his death. Interesting. So, and she says, I didn't like Mr. Hall. Okay. And if you've seen any of the videos, Mr. Hall is the guy that you see in the passenger seat. I think he's wearing like a red and white outfit. Yeah. And really and truly, he's the one that tried to pass the first counterfeit bill that gets refused by the sales clerk. So this should have been him, not George. No, I'm not saying the whole thing should have been him. I'm saying, this, it should have been nipped in the bud right when he did that. Like, let's call the police. This guy's trying to pass a counterfeit bill. Um, Not, let's hand the bill to George Floyd and let him try it. No. Yeah. So then they put on the two paramedics that arrived at the scene. The one paramedic was very subdued in his testimony. He just didn't want to volunteer any information. He was, you really had, the prosecutor really had to pull stuff out of him. What does this mean? And what does that mean? And like, he just wasn't, I don't know if he was afraid or if he was scared, but he did say initially they were dispatched to the scene as a code 2, which means it's a routine call. You don't use your lights and sirens. You just, go with the normal flow of traffic. And the information they were given was that he had a mouth injury. And he said within about a minute and a half later, the call changed to a code 3, lights and siren, but they weren't given any information. So they had no idea getting to this scene what they were coming into. None. So when they get to the scene, now the first paramedic, the one that I say was very subdued, he was the driver. So he gets out and he goes around the vehicle and he goes to the back of the ambulance to open up the ambulance and, get the stretcher out. But the other guy testifies, the other guy's much more forward, much more open. He says, I go over there, I check for a carotid pulse, I check his pupils, he has a little flashlight. He says the pupils were fixed and dilated. Oh, he didn't say fixed. He didn't use the word fixed. He says they were dilated, very large, and I could not palpate a pulse. Had no pulse. But the thing that I found interesting was, and they showed it, they zoomed in on it on one of the videos, is that Derek Chauvin has his knee on the guy's neck, but the paramedic felt, there's a very specific area for the carotid. He was able to palpate that area unobstructed by Chauvin's knee. So was Chauvin, I think that the point they were trying to make was perhaps Derek's knee wasn't compressing his carotid artery. I don't know. But anyway, that second paramedic that was very forthright said he was dead. Unconscious, not moving, no pulse, dilated eyes. He's dead. So he turns around to his partner and says, let's get him in the ambulance. I'll start treatment in the back and let's get out of here. And the first guy testifies the reason they wanted to leave the scene was that the crowd was, how did he put it? They wanted to get away from, because the crowd was upset. He said it was a group of upset people, and they needed to focus on a resuscitation, because that partner turns around to him and says, he's dead, we got to get out of here. So they put him in the back of the ambulance, and the second paramedic says, I had to, because Chauvin is standing between him and the stretcher, and he finally says, you got to get out of the way. So he moves Chauvin, and they put this guy in the back of the ambulance, and they said, they grabbed one of the police officers who helped start compressions. But as soon as that door is shut, they're starting to work on him. He is in full cardiac arrest. They put the pads on him, and what it is it's an automated external defibrillator, which is an AED, which the paramedics have in their ambulance. They carry with them, but you can find those devices in a lot of establishments. And the off-duty firefighter had even testified that what she would have done is checked for a pulse. If he didn't have one, she would have instructed someone to go into Cup Foods and find the AED, because there was probably one inside there, or should have been one inside there, because people can drop dead anywhere. You'll find a lot of AEDs by pools, because a lot of people tend to, they'll jump into a pool and have a heart attack for just from the change in temperature of from the surface to the water. It's very common. So you'll find AEDs by pools, in airports. So anyway, the one in the ambulance, they put the pads on him. And what this device will do is, if there's a shockable rhythm, it will shock the patient. But it'll also show the paramedics what that rhythm is. Well, George Floyd was flatlined, asystole, which means flatline, nothing, no heart activity whatsoever. His heart is not doing anything. Generally, for that defibrillator to fire, you have to see like either a pulseless electrical activity, some kind of activity of the heart, or AFib. They saw nothing. So the first paramedic, he drives to this a couple blocks away. They didn't go far. He stops the vehicle, gets in the back. They put on this device. I forget what they called it. I'd never heard of it. But they put this device on him that actually does compressions. It has like this plunger that just does the compressions for them, which frees them up to start the IV, get an ET tube in. They had to put a tube down his throat so he could breathe. They had to get a line in him. I don't think they were successful at that, because eventually they had to, finding a vein, they had to actually do what's called an intraosseous line, which is actually where you drill a right into the bone. It's usually done in your tibia. You drill right into the leg bone and you administer fluid through the bone. It's been around for many, many years, but not many people have heard of it, because it's sort of a last resort. So they get this intraosseous line going. They administer the traditional cardiac medication, your epinephrine, your sodium bicarb, and by the time they get him to the hospital, he is what the monitor is showing pulseless electrical activity, which is called PEA, which is not a survivable rhythm, really. His heart is basically not doing anything, still not doing anything. So, and the one paramedic says, listen, when I picked him up, he was dead. When I left him at the hospital, he was dead. Like, he used the word deceased. And of course, there were objections all around, and the judge sustained the answer. He let it stand. It didn't matter. The jury had already heard it. Yes, it was dead. You picked up a dead guy, you dropped off a dead guy. And so they worked on him in the hospital for a little while. We haven't heard any testimony of doctors or nurses at the hospital, but it wasn't long. They pronounced him deceased at the hospital. Now, paramedics do not have the authority to pronounce someone deceased. But, the question is, how long was he in that condition before the ambulance arrived? Yeah, I don't know. So I'm just looking over my notes. So then the next testimony was really interesting. The firefighter commander, he he's on the fire truck, and they get called out, code 2. separately from the ambulance code, and it was later on that the dispatcher added them to the call. But they get to the scene, and by the time they get to the scene, they have been upgraded to code 3. Still, no, they don't know what they're walking into either. But when he testified that when he came on the scene, he saw that there was a crowd. His assumption was that there had probably been some kind of struggle and an injury as a result of that struggle. So they're looking for the patient. Now, the ambulance has already taken the patient 2 blocks away. So there's some confusion about, the ambulance driver says, I told them where I was, but the firefighters, I don't know if they didn't hear it, but they're looking inside Cup Foods for a patient. So who do they find inside Cup Foods but the off-duty firefighter? And they knew her, of course, and he said, yes, she appeared very distraught. He didn't talk to her then. He said, my partner stood and talked to her. He says, I saw a police officer, and by the time I saw the police officer, pretty much simultaneously with approaching this officer, he gets a dispatch, comes across and tells him exactly where the ambulance is, so he just departs. He and his partner depart, and there's actually 4 personnel in this fire truck. So he gets to the scene, him and his partner, they stay to help with the CPR. He sends the other 2 back in the rig to talk to the off-duty police fighter and calm her down because he was concerned. This is a coworker. So he sends them back to the scene to find her and get her calmed down. And so they proceed to, participate in the resuscitation. And at this point, it frees up the driver to begin the ride to the hospital. So that was his testimony. Then you get the sergeant, who was the next witness. Now, this guy was really, really interesting. This is the guy that, witness number 1, who was the dispatcher. I think you may recall she testified that she called the sergeant. Well, this was the guy she called. She called the sergeant and she said, I don't want to be a snitch, but these officers have been on top of this guy for quite a long time. So he decides he's going to call Chauvin. So he gets Chauvin on the phone. Chauvin, yes, we had to take him down to the ground. Chauvin doesn't tell the part about them being on top of him or him having his knee on the neck, but yes, we had to take him down to the ground. Let's see. So one of the, they went over this sergeant's duties. One of his jobs is to do a force report. If there's ever use of force in the field, those officers are required to report that to him, and he has to do a report. And that report is forwarded to internal affairs. So he did say that the officers are on the scene. If there's something medically going on and an ambulance is en route, they are required to administer aid until that ambulance gets there. So, and like I told you yesterday, the other officer, not Chauvin, but another officer checked his pulse. They knew he did not have a pulse, but they did not administer aid until the ambulance got there. That's concerning. He says officers are trained on positional asphyxia. They're told if you take someone to the ground, they're in handcuffs, as soon as possible, you get them into the side recovery position so they can breathe. Yeah. So then there was this huge sidebar with the judge because he was asked if this use of force was reasonable once the subject was no longer resisting arrest or resisting. And he was not allowed to answer that question. And I suspect it's because there was a lot of um, there was a huge issue about whether this guy was actually expert enough to say this, give this opinion. Now, I think we'll hear an expert later on tell us what the answer to that question is, but they wouldn't let this guy answer that question. So that ended his testimony. So, like I said, today is half a day. I don't know who's gonna be on the stand today, but it's been one incredible week of testimony. So I just wanted to, add a little editorial here. Um, I have not formulated any opinions one way or the other about the guilt or innocence of this defendant. I am merely giving you guys what the evidence has shown, sometimes my little interpretation of the evidence, some things that I feel like are important or not important, but please don't feel like I'm leaning one way or the other. Totally unbiased at this point. Later on, I might tell you how I would feel as a juror in deciding the case, but I think in fairness to this defendant, you have to make your decisions based on the totality of the evidence. And we haven't heard all the evidence, so it would be unfair for us to comment or remark on the guilt or innocence of this defendant at this point. Sure, it's been very emotional testimony. Some of it looks very bad for this defendant. Some of it looks favorable to this defendant. But I think we owe it to this defendant to give him the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. So we need to hear all of the evidence. So just keep that in the back of your mind as you listen to further coverage of this trial, because I think that's important. Okay. Yay! I'm so excited I get to craft today. You're like, this is a crafting channel. Why are we talking about trials? Because I love true crime. I think it's so much fun covering these trials. It really is. I'm, I'm looking at this trial like it's my job, and some of you guys out there too are watching this trial. I'm loving the comments. I read every one of them. I may not respond, but I read every one of them, and you're really, really getting wrapped up in this. Even my son called me last night. He's like, "Are you watching this?" I'm like, "Yeah." So then he and I had this, discussion, and I was very shocked that even my son, who's pretty conservative, is keeping an open mind. But you also have to remember that my son was raised by a police officer. So he I'm sure, I'm not going to tell you what his opinion was, because I think it might even take you by surprise, but he too is willing to listen to hear what the rest of the evidence shows. Oh, I'm so excited. Her dress is almost finished, completed. Like just this little sleeve I did, and then I have this little part of her sleeve here. We got her lipstick. All her makeup is done. It looks pretty good. I was worried when I first put this color down that it looked kind of odd, this fleshy color, but it's starting to look okay. I wish my squares would line up correctly. I know. You've got the thing, Rebecca. It just popped out too. Gosh darn it. All right, one of them popped out. Where did it go? It's probably in my lap. Oh well. All right, we'll put another one in. Oh, here it is right here. I found it. Okay, there we go. All right. Now we're in business. Oh well. All right, guys, it's time to go enjoy the day off. If I'm going to try to pop in and out of different lives today. There are lives all day long. There's I'm going to miss somebody if I start listing them, but and I think I'm supposed to be in Mickey's live tonight, which is at 7 Central, 8 Eastern. So if you see me popping in a live, say hello. And if you see me tonight in Mickey's live, come join us. We're going to talk about the mystery diamond painting. It kicked off yesterday. I don't have one yet. That's okay. But we will be on Mickey's channel talking about the mystery diamond painting. She's going to show you how she prepares her canvas for the mystery painting. And I will see you all then. Have a great holiday, and I'll see you tomorrow in the morning show. Love you. Bye.